Yeah, he says there's a big block engine they found in a farm scrap load in a shed, so we're gonna put the camera down and check it out. Remember a few weeks ago I went up to an auction in Nebraska. It was a guy's time capsule collection, all been locked away in the shed for decades. He collected a lot of different things and vehicles, and I'd gone up there kind of with the expectation of buying a vehicle at the sale, and that did not happen. So afterward, I made a quick call to a friend and had my eye on a car up at his place. So I rolled with a plan B, which was meeting him to load it. That's good. So the next part of this story involved another Chevrolet, this 1964 C10 that a friend of mine who does farm scrap found at a place, called me, and asked if I was interested. Said, yes, of course I will save it. But before I left his place, he let me know there was another piece I probably should have a look at over in one of the scrap bins. They had found in a barn a big block engine. He wasn't sure exactly what it was, but I looked at it, took a chance on it, and took it home. So he said, yeah, this is a 427 big block. At least that's what they told him. Now, in this business, you hear all kinds of stuff. So I'm thinking, yeah, right, it's probably later 454 or even like 366 or some other truck block. So I took a quick look over it, and first thing I saw was this passenger high performance marking. And so that was about all I needed to see, and I said, yep, I'll take it, load it up. And I know a lot of you guys think I'm very encyclopedic on this stuff, but some of it, if I've run across it before and know what it is, that's one thing. But if it's a new deal like this, then I'm kind of researching and finding out as I go. So that's a little bit of what we've got here. And so I did look and found the date code, and that's A279, which is end of January of 69. Then I found the block number, and that is this, it'll focus, 3968512. So now I look up 3968512, and it comes back as passenger 427. So that could be anything from Corvette, Chevelle, big car. There are a lot of different passenger cars that did use 427. It was optional in everything in 69 except for like your Nova. Of course, they still built the Corvair, but that's rear engine. So any of this, of course, I'm a little new to it, so if I haven't said it the way it actually is, feel free to jump in, correct me if I'm wrong. So we've unloaded this thing here, got it home, and I'd remembered from other V8 engines that I've had that up on the front on this pad there's other information, and I haven't cleaned it off yet. This is going to be the process of discovery, and we're going to figure out together what it is. Alright, so what we've got here, the T is the Tonawanda, New York engine plant, 03 is March of 1969. So with a January foundry date, that means pretty much in line. These things would sit around a few months. There's a bit of lead time from when they were cast to when they were actually machined. And of course, when they were machined, they were assigned a destination for which vehicle they were going to go into. So that 14 is the 14th day. So middle of March of 69. And then LE code means that what we're looking at is an LS1 427 that's 335 horsepower. And that was the base horsepower for one of these engines. Your next up was the L36, which was a 390 horse. And then your next up was the L72, and that was a 427 horsepower 427. So they unlocked the magic 1 horsepower per cubic inch. Now the 396 was the base size of the big block, and those are available also in 69 as the L66 designation, which was 265 horsepower. And for anyone who's been around the channel long, you'll remember my 1969 Chevy Kingswood wagon has that engine in it. So engine like this, 427 block, really neat thing to pick up as a dusty barn find. Not necessarily barn fresh, it's barn stale, needs a rebuild. But really neat thing to run across, especially out on a farm. You'd think, it's probably a truck motor out of a medium duty or something like that, but no, this is what we're looking at. Of course, 427 last year available, 69. 1970 they went on to the 454, and that was it. So kind of neat to find something like this. It's very final production of the 427. So that LE on the pad just means that it was a turbo 400 automatic, not a manual transmission option. And then these smaller letters here, that's the sequential for the VIN. In the 60s, there was a lot of rampant car theft starting to be a thing. Either teenagers joyriding or people stripping vehicles and selling the parts. And so by stamping that VIN in there, it just meant that certain parts of the car, higher priced major components like an engine, would be more traceable. And of course 69 GM came out with the locking steering column, so that was another way to fight the auto theft. So 69 Furies and things like that still had the ignition switch in the dash. Just a little bit of trivia for why later engine like this has a partial VIN and the earlier ones did not. This is a really exciting thing for me to run across. Hope y'all are as excited about it as I am, because man, you decode this thing and seeing that high performance passenger on there, like, I was kind of almost shaking when I was looking at the thing. I've looked it over. I feel like it's pretty decent as far as visual inspection. I don't see any real wear in the bores or any cracks or any physical damage. So I think this thing be pretty good piece to revive. Of course, you never know why one was taken apart and pieces scattered and didn't go back together. So I've laid out just one of the cylinder heads to show that I have them with it, and I've been told that these are oval port heads, and I'm not really the high performance guy, not really the mechanical parts guy, but you can take a look at them here and see what they are. And these are all marked on the inside of the head under the valve cover, so you don't see the markings when they're all put together, but that's passenger and 3931063 part number for these heads. And then turn this around. This is a little bit hard to read. Looks like 31069. So within the range of when that block was made, so you could say these are matching number heads that go with that block. So right here is the 69 Bel Air. The Bel Air two-door was only available as this post model, and this one's pretty original car. They have done a little bit of work and touch up on the bottom, I think just mainly after putting some filler in the rust holes by a Iowa car, and this is pretty typical of the way they're going to be. This is a car that I did have some knowledge and awareness of from Ryan McAtee's Iowa Classic Cars YouTube channel. I had reached out to him about it, and he had already had a deal made on it with a friend of his. And I went up there and took a look at the car, and guy wasn't quite ready to sell. That was a couple years ago, and I had been up after the auction where we bought over 20 vehicles, was real near that salvage yard. Talked to him about it, and he said, yeah, he's probably going to be focusing more on Chevelles and some of his other builds, and he said this one would be available. The main thing to know about this car, and you can look back on Ryan's channel, it did start out as a 6-cylinder, and they actually got it running on the channel. And you know me, I like all my stuff pretty stock original, and so I was interested in the car just because even though the frame is totally shot, I do have a parts car, and I thought, well, hey, this would be something gotta get running. And 2-post lift, a frame swap honestly really isn't that bad. Do your brakes, make it kind of a fun driver. And turns out somebody at the yard there was needing a 6-cylinder, and this is the car that they pulled it out of. So at this point, the ticket's kind of punched, and it's a blank slate, being no drivetrain. Frame is pretty bad shape on this car. You can see, man, they've done just about everything to keep it going, plated it, and it's done. So not a big deal to me because I've got this 4-door parts car. It is complete under the hood. It's an automatic car. We'll show inside of this Bel Air 2-door post. And so one of the differences on this car is that it is a manual transmission. So it's got the clutch pedals that it was born with. You can see, I don't know, this car has a look of like somebody that was handy in general, but not specifically a car person who'd worked on it, because I mean it's been fixed up, patched up, but it's not necessarily all even automotive parts that are on it. So a lot of that stuff needs to go away, and what's here of the car, the bones are really solid, and it's not really too molested and torn up. That is incorrect later year rubber steering wheel on it, but believe it or not, that wheel is a corporate piece shared with the 69 Camaro, and you can go buy those aftermarket, new out of the catalog in your color. This is a non-AC car, not too uncommon up in Iowa there that someone wouldn't order it. Of course, you got all the right manual accessories, manual windows, that sort of thing. So as it goes with any one of these vehicles, there's kind of a crossroads of decision on how to build it. And of course, as anybody knows, just like remodeling a house or fixing up a car, you want to decide what you're doing. And if you stick to the plan, it's cheapest, simplest, straightforward, shortest timeline. If you change things during the build, which inevitably does happen, then it gets a little more expensive and a little more complicated. So you guys on this channel have always been really interested in weighing in your input on how a car should be built, and you can see kind of the obvious ways that this one could go. Almost feel like I need to draw a flow chart here, but you've got a 69 Bel Air that was a stock 6-cylinder 3-speed manual transmission car, and that is still an option. There could be a running 6-cylinder somewhere that could go back in this car and put it all back to original. Of course, the 427 block is another option for a build, and like I was saying in the little walk around of that specific engine and heads, it is a automatic transmission coated block, so a person could pick up a turbo 400 to go with it, and that would kind of make a correct matching drivetrain. Of course, then you would pull the automatic brake pedal and steering column out of the four-door, and that would kind of make it all go together. Or you could use the existing clutch pedal setup that's in the Bel Air 2-door, and that thing could be 427 manual. So several options there. Any of them pretty achievable, pretty doable. Obviously, rebuilding an engine like that 427, by the time you spend out the money for your rotating assembly, crankshaft kit, you're going to be in multiple thousands of dollars, and it's a little difficult anymore to find guys that will rebuild engines. And I'll tell you, that is not me. I enjoy working with cars, towing them, finding them, piecing them together, and any of the work that I do on them generally in the past has been panel fab, rust repair. I've never had someone teach me how to fix dents, so I'm not really too into that. I wouldn't say I really consider myself a very mechanical person. I can get by, I can figure stuff out when I need to, but most of the time I'm just taking things apart, putting them together. A lot of the theory is kind of beyond me, and I know any of this stuff, it's a bit of a continuum of the layers of advanced things that you pick up and build a knowledge base over the years. But with that being said, most of the people that are doing this stuff, a 30-minute job for them is a 2-hour job for me. So all that involved, I just don't really enjoy mechanical stuff all that much. So here's just a quick look at the 69 Impala. This one's 4-door post, and it's one that probably 10 years ago a guy called me and they were wanting to clean up some cars in the field, and they sold me this car. I didn't really have a specific idea for it at the time, but now looking back, I'm kind of glad I saved this old thing, because between the frame and any other body and interior pieces for the Bel Air, this one will make really, really good parts car to put that one back together, back on the road. It is pretty basic car, 350 automatic, and I did try on that engine, but it was seized pretty hard when I got it, so nothing really too exciting over it. Probably shouldn't sign off without giving a quick look at the 64 C10. This one's pretty average condition. Obviously the bed's missing. It is not that difficult to find beds around here. There's a lot of pickup bed trailers that were cut from old trucks back in the day. And sometimes if you even get lucky, you can find a short bed, which is a little more desirable. This one's got kind of an interesting brush paint patina to it, but it's not really exactly usable because there's a lot of filler in it. And this passenger fender, they've actually replaced with a fiberglass one. Although if it all had that matching look, it'd be kind of neat. But this fender's got some rot in it. These new fenders out of steel are pretty cheap. I think they're in the $200 range. You see that driver's door's kind of a mess too. It's got a lot of old filler and old work in it. One kind of neat thing about this truck, it was an old Phillips 66 agricultural something. So there's a little bit of a history on it. Frame, I mean, it's usable, it's not terrible, but it's not as good as you'd probably like to build something really nice. You can see this cross member just getting rust all the way through. And then these plates where it's sandwiched over, it's just heaving rust crumbs out. And the trailing arms, you can see it actually starts to push them apart when that rust crumb business heaves in there. So not something a guy probably end up using if you were building a really nice truck. I do have a pretty much mint set of these trailing arms in the garage, and those fit past more than one generation, so they're pretty easy to come by. Obviously any of that new weird fancy stuff they make too, which I'm not really into, just not really my jam. It's got the little overload springs on the back. You can tell this truck has been used and used and used, because that thing is worn all the way through. Look inside. One of these trucks, at least in this area, you pretty much expect you're gonna have rockers, cab corners, floor braces. They actually do remake a whole one-piece floor, and several years ago, I remember seeing them at swap meets in the $850 range, which I'm sure now is probably almost double that after supply chain stuff and that sort of thing. It's a 4-speed manual. You see it's got the deluxe gauges, not the dummy lights. Pretty decent truck inside, honestly. One of the best parts about it is up above the windshield, it's not all rusted out. The reason that happens is the base of these A-pillars are hollow, and the mice will crawl up, they'll nest in there. The byproducts of the mice, the nests and the urine, they're really corrosive, and so it'll just rot that in a hurry. Another season or two, you get mice in there. The trick that I've seen is you take like a stainless steel pot scrubber and you just shove it up in the end of that A-pillar, and then that way they can't get in there. Similar thing people do in their houses. Really cool part of this truck is this seat is like mint original, and that vinyl's still pliable. So I'm gonna hatch a plan to keep this thing stored indoors. So it's actually not originally light blue. It was this, I call it teal frost. I know that's not the catalog name. As a popular shade in the 60s, and every manufacturer kind of had their version of it. Quick look under the hood, pretty basic truck. Again, it's a 4-speed manual. Manual brakes, heater. Believe the blue valve cover is a 230 inline 6. Of course, those debuted in 1963. Got the Motorcraft battery. Built Chevy Tough with Ford stuff. This thing turns over, and just looking at it, visual inspection, there isn't any reason to think that this old dog wouldn't respond pretty well to the Will It Run treatment. So, at some point, that's on the list to happen. I've encountered some pretty major personal and professional hurdles that I'm currently working my way through, and as a result, schedules and output definitely suffering, but I'll tell you guys, I'm not going to let it get in the way of the channel. This is stuff that you guys come here to see, and I'm going to get through it and work through it, and you guys won't see anything different on your end. So I don't know how long it's going to take, but I'm in it. That's all I'll say right now. Cool little decal here. Heb's Automotive Machine. I'll put that in the shade so it's a little easier to see. 59th Street South. It's kind of close to Hayesville and South Wichita area. Really, really grateful to this scrapper friend who, even though he bought the truck for scrap, he did have a heart to call us and say, hey, this is what it'll scale for. Would you give me this and save its life? And of course, you know, that's what we're all about here on the channel. And so I gave him a resounding yes. And that was kind of the whole deal, just to finish up and bring everything full circle. I know you guys came here to see a rare 427, and you did. And figured some people might want to catch a little info on this truck. So appreciate everybody stopping by the channel.